everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Inner Typewriter, the show with typewriters, coffee, and conversations about how to make our writing better. I'm your host, Scott Calhoun, and with me today is Woody Weingarten. Welcome to the show, Woody.
Thank you.
And Woody is the writer of the memoir Roller Coaster. And first of all, before we get into today's subject, just tell us a little about the book.
Well, the book is based on my wife's breast cancer, which she had 24 years ago. The book is not that old. But it took me years to write because I wasn't sure I wanted to write it. I wasn't sure she wanted me to write it. It's a tough subject, but it worked out well, and we figured, both of us, that it could help other people who are going through the same process. Mm-hmm. In fact, I run a support group, which I've done for 24 years, a weekly one, that also deals with that subject.
Wow. Yeah, so a subject that has support groups sounds like it's going to be a difficult subject to even think about. And that's kind of the subject for today's show is how do you write about a difficult subject that is very emotionally powerful and hard to work with. And it sounds like it took a while to even decide if you wanted to write something. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We weren't sure because we weren't sure how open and honest we wanted to be. And for any difficult subject, that becomes the first question. Mm-hmm. How much you want to include, how much you want to leave out.
Mm-hmm. And where did you guys fall on that line?
My wife took out 3 paragraphs out
of the whole book?
Yeah.
Oh.
That she thought were inappropriate for one reason or another. She had questions about some more, but she decided to leave it in because we wanted it to be an honest portrayal of what we went through and representative of the title, which is Roller Coaster, which is what she experienced and what most people in life-threatening situations experience. Mm-hmm.
And your background before writing this was as a journalist. So how did your career as a journalist kind of set you up for writing a book?
Well, it set me up in several ways. One is every now and then I keep a journal. And every now and then I keep notes of some things that I think are important in my life. And I had a lot of notes about this. Not a journal per se, but a lot of representative writing. Mm-hmm. So I could rely on that for accuracy. Mm-hmm. Also, when I was doing research for the book, because it includes a guide to research on the disease itself and on medications and treatments. When I was doing that research, I had all the skills of doing research from before. The net has helped a lot in that regard. I used to have to go to the library. And so I learned to be accurate as a journalist and to where to get information and how to obtain that.
Right. And then as a journalist, were you already thinking someday I want to write a book, or didn't even think about it until this happened?
No, I had written a book before and sold it to Grosset and Dunlap, and they did not publish it because they were bought out by a multinational company that said we're only going to do a backlist. So I got the rights back, and then the topic was no longer topical.
Oh, geez.
So I knew how to write a book. I just this one was a question of whether I would do it or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm now working on a second book, just about finished.
For this book in particular, it's the story of finding out some really bad news, right?
Yeah.
And the emotion of that, did your career as a journalist to try to remove all the emotion out of your piece, or were you able to get the emotion into it?
Everything is in there. Yeah. It starts out with my being terrified that my wife was going to die. Mm-hmm. It has changed a little bit since that happened. It's not so terrifying. There are a lot of new drugs, a lot of new treatments that have helped women survive. Mm-hmm. But at that point, as I say, 2 decades ago, it was not quite that. So I was terrified. She did not admit to her terror, and that's in the book as well. But the idea of the book was to be, again, honest, direct, and say, this is what you might experience. And I think I accomplished that.
When you were considering writing the book, what were some things that you were worried about that might make it like you didn't want to write a book? What would be some reasons not to have written it that would have made
Well, the intimacy. I mean, I talk in the book about her breasts. I talk about her vagina. I talk about everything that we've experienced. I talk about our sex life, which had deteriorated because of that. I talk about the psychological fears and the emotional strain. And I talk about the fact that we did not talk to each other about certain things. And prior to that, we had never withheld anything. But we were each afraid the other would react badly. And so we withheld. And years later, we talked about that and found out that we had done that.
Wow. So sharing that intimacy was something that you knew that was going to be a big rift that you were going to have to cross somehow,
Exactly.
a scary possibility.
Yeah. But we both decided that it would be best to do that because that, again, would be helpful to the reader. And the book is aimed at men, but it is also available in tone and what we say for women, but it is aimed at men. There were very few books aimed at men about life-threatening diseases.
So you describe yourself as a reluctant expert, which is understandable. What point were you at in this process when you decided you wanted to write the book? Were you already an expert, or did the book make you an expert?
The disease made me an expert. I refer to it in the book as cancer college. The information is amazing what you have to learn in a very short amount of time. And doctors are reluctant to talk about certain things. They're reluctant to talk about money. They're reluctant to talk about sex. Their idea is, I have to cure this or fix it or hold it up or whatever. And they're not interested in the other things. We had to learn all of that on our own as we went. But moreover, we had to learn about the disease and what the possibilities were and all of the choices that we had. So yes, I was an expert, and then I gained more expertise through the support group that I ran, and still running, because there were other people who were sharing their information and their intimacies.
And it was at that point, sort of after you'd gone to cancer college, that you thought this book needs to happen?
No, it actually took years before I got to that point, and probably close to 20 years later that I decided this is something we should do.
And over those 20 years, were you kind of on the fence about it, or was it even a thought?
It really wasn't a thought to write a book until, as the support group, more and more I saw how that information was helping the men who joined the support group. And it's a drop-in group, so people stay for as long as they need the help, and then they drop out. But they would pick up what they needed. And I thought that information was in there. And there is a chapter in the book about men's reactions as well.
Wow, 20 years is a long time to then go back and write about a subject. Do you think that distance kind of helped you approach the book, where if you were writing while it happened, would that be more difficult?
I don't think I could have written while it was happening. We were too immersed in the treatments and her survival. There was a panic for me about that. So I don't think I could have. I wrote notes, and I wrote a journal kind of thing. So I put down information that I had subsequently referred to and quoted from extensively. But that I could not have turned that into a piece of material late at that point, I
at
think.
that time.
Yeah.
And then were the notes you writing, is that just out of habit from being a journalist, or were you writing with an idea to something in the future?
I had no idea of the futuristic things on that.
Mm-hmm.
But as a journalist, I have done that periodically. When I turned 50, I kept a journal for the entire year just to see what that would be like. And have toyed with the idea of turning that into a book, but I don't like it. And I'm much older now. But note-taking, I carry a pad in my pocket all the time, pen, and I'm jotting down things, and I have Post-its all over the place.
Yeah.
And when I was at a paper that I worked for, newspaper, I ringed my computer with Post-its.
Whoops.
There were Post-its all over the place. And in fact, on my 60th birthday, they had a surprise party for me. And one of the things they did was take off all the Post-its and destroy all the things I had lined up on my desk because I'm a compulsive, obsessive type. And everybody laughed, and I didn't then. Now I think it's funny.
Kind of ritual
Right.
cleansing almost.
Right.
Wow. Well, that's good. I mean, as far as writing memoirs go, copious amounts of notes can only help, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So getting in the habit of taking notes is, even if it's going on while your life, that's whatever that difficult subject is going on.
I think the note-taking itself is helping you exercise the demons and your fears. Just doing that without looking ahead to writing anything or using it in any other way, I think psychologically it's helpful.
Right. Almost, I mean, some therapy methods talk about like writing a letter to someone, even if you don't send it.
Right.
Almost kind of a similar thing, except you don't really know what the final destination of these notes is going to be, but it's
Right.
like you said, exercising the demon of the moment. If you're undergoing anxiety,
Right.
it can kind of help to get something out of your head or out of your system and onto a piece of paper.
Out of your psyche, I think.
Yeah. Great. So what were some challenges when you started to sit down to write that you faced? Was it difficult to remember how you felt, or was it right there?
No,
accessible.
That was there. It is still there. We talk about it all the time. My wife, for years, when she went back to have mammograms or anything else like that, had fears
Right.
that it's going to come back. And so it's always there. Cancer, and there are other life-threatening diseases. Similarly, it's chronic, and so it could come back at any time. So you never let go of the fear entirely. We are much more mellow now, obviously, than we were back then. But what we had to do was decide, again, how much we wanted to reveal, in a sense, and how much we wanted to withhold. We withheld virtually nothing.
Wow.
My wife was very generous in that way, because she too wanted, and she is also in a support group still, all these years later.
Wow. When you were writing the book, was there anything that surprised you that came out of it? 'Cause it sounds like when you guys talked, you found out things that had been going on that you didn't realize. Was that when you were writing the book that you learned these things?
Yes.
Wow.
But there were fewer surprises in that regard as to what had changed. Those were surprising because we didn't realize there had been so much improvement technologically, so much improvement in terms of the way the world was accepting breast cancer. There's a couple of paragraphs in the book about the fact that people weren't even allowed to use the word breast back then and earlier. It was considered obscene. And now, of course, that's just a common word.
Wow. I didn't know that. So is part of the book talking about the period of time that this took place in and understanding that compared to now?
A little bit, yeah. It talks more about the improvements than it does about the past, but it mentions the past. But it also, as I have indicated, it has a lot of research and meds, and the book is a couple of years old now, but it is still current, and I'm considering a second edition.
With the updated, here's
Right.
the latest.
Exactly.
Wow. So, how would you recommend other writers considering embarking on a memoir that was about a difficult subject? How would you recommend that they approach? Would you recommend they do the same approach as you, which sounds like it was note-taking and then letting some time pass between the difficult subject?
I think everybody is an individual, and they have to gear it to their own personalities and their own emotions. But I do believe that one of the first steps is to decide what you want to include and what you want to leave out. Having done that, if it's about you and other people, I think you need to talk to the other people and see what they're comfortable with, because you don't want to insult or upset people. That's not what it's about.
Right.
But this book was looked at by my children, and we had to decide what we wanted them to see or know. And my wife has a daughter. Same thing. And the idea of sanitizing never really came into our heads. That wasn't what it was about. It was about what little things we wanted to leave out. And so that would be the first thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be to set a more reasonable timetable than I did.
Because it took 20 years to decide to write the book, and then how long did actually writing the book take?
3 or 4 years.
Wow, yeah. So that's quite a project. Well, you've got a new project coming along. It's called Mystery Dates.
Exactly.
So what is that? What is that about?
That is also a memoir to a large degree, but it also goes beyond memoir, just as Roller Coaster does. Mystery Dates is something that my wife and I have been doing for 30 years, where one of us will take the other somewhere and the other doesn't know where they're going. And it could be as simple as we're going out to dinner, or it could be as involved as we're going to take a plane ride to Las Vegas to see your best friend. She didn't know that, and we did that, and that took a week. Or it could be a theme date, which is really complicated. One of my favorite dates that my wife concocted was called a dance date, and we started off at the Hyatt Hotel and did tea dancing, which is basically ballroom dancing. And then we went to a restaurant where they had belly dancing.
I see.
And then we went to a dance concert from Balanchine. So she had all that arranged in one evening.
How wonderful. So
the book is that, but it's more of tips of where anybody, you or any reader, can go locally, nationally, globally, because I've researched all of that, interesting places and odd and quirky places. And I've got a paragraph and a half that if you have the bucks, you can even do a mystery date to outer space.
Oh yeah. Is that how did we get to? Is it one of those commercial rocket things or?
Yeah. That's what I'm suggesting.
Wow.
If you have really deep pockets.
Yeah. We'll be able to go to the moon on the date soon, I think. Well, is this the prototype cover?
This is a working cover.
Wow.
The title is pretty well locked in, and most of the cover is locked in, but it's going to be tweaked.
Yeah.
And
that looks good.
So.
And so it's for people who are in relationships it's kind of like you wouldn't call it self-help romance self-help.
No, it's not. It is for people who are looking to keep the sizzle in the relationship or store it if you've lost a little of that. It's for straight couples, for gay couples, for threesomes if that's what you're into, for anything, any relationship at all. It can be, you can do it with family members, you can do it with peers, you can do it with working companions, friends. And we refer to that throughout the book, that you can do this. But the anecdotes are my wife and I, what we've done, the kinds of things we've done. And some of them are, as I say, complicated, and some of them are very simple. I did one, for example, on our anniversary, where I blindfolded her and took her to the place where we met again, because we'd met as young people, and then we met 28 years later, after we each had other relationships. And I blindfolded her, I set it up, it was in a pizza place. And I went in, she stayed in the car while I set up a table with candlesticks and things, more fancy than the first time around. And then I took her in and she smelled the pizza and said, "We're in the pizza place." But it can be anything you want. It's as creative as you want or non-creative. It doesn't, you gear it to your own personality.
No patrolman was walking by and saw a lady in the car blindfolded?
No. I lucked out on that.
Well, in the spirit of typewriters and writing, and you've got so many projects, thanks for sharing what you've learned about writing Roller Coaster and approaching difficult subjects. And hopefully our viewers are taking notes, and they'll be ready when the time comes to do their project because of your wisdom you've shared.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you all for watching. As always, don't forget to follow, share, and subscribe. See you next time.